always on the first Sunday of Lent, my friends, is the temptations of Jesus in the desert. And I came across a whole bunch of different quotes, and I listed just two of them. Why is it that opportunity knocks only once, yet temptation bangs on the door constantly? Ever notice that the whisper of temptation can be heard farther than the loudest call to duty? How true, how true. There was a small little shop, and on the outside there was some fruit piled up on display, and there was a young boy looking at the fruit. And the shop owner comes running out, and he said, "Young man," he said, "are you trying to steal one of those pieces of fruit?" And the young boy looked stuttering. He said, "No, sir." He said, "I'm trying not to." We have to be careful what we look at, don't we, my friends, with our eyes? All of us. Our eyes can be a great occasion of sin, of what we look at, We need to be very, very careful with our eyes, all of us. In Greek mythology, the siren was a creature half bird and half woman, and it was outside the island of Aegon, which was beautiful but particularly dangerous, around filled with rocks. And these sirens would sing and lure the sailors in, and they would crash their boat along the shores. Odysseus wanted his crew. What he did was put wax in his ears of every sailor that was on his boat, and he himself tied himself to the mast so he would not be tempted to steer towards the shore. And you know, my friends, you know what that's called? There's a word for that, or a phrase: avoiding the near occasion of sin. And every one of the major sins, whether it be lust, whether it be anger, whether it be jealousy, all those, we need to avoid the near occasion of sin when we see it springing within us. There was an article I came across this past week. It was titled, 3 Temptations in Dealing with Temptations. Interesting article, isn't it? 3 temptations in dealing with temptations. And of course, you see an article like that, I was drawn to it. It was interesting what they said. They said, we're tempted to doubt the power of Jesus, was the first temptation list. I've always been this way. I can't change. No, we can change, my friends, all of us. But we need to rely on that power and that reality of God. And sometimes we doubt that, don't we? There's a power available to us. And we need not be tempted to doubt that. And sometimes we do. Sometimes we do. The second temptation, he said, is we doubt the power in the church. Interesting, when you look at all those off regimes, whether it be China, whether it be the Russians, whether it be Cuban or the Germans, the first thing they did as they were rising to power was suppress the church. Why? Why? Because they knew there was power in the church. Bishop Barron talks at length about this. And he says, you know, the church is made up of clay vessels. You and I are clay vessels. He said, these vessels that are in the church, you and I, are fragile. Many of us are broken. He said, but we don't stay in the church because of the vessels. We stay because of the treasure. Interesting, isn't it? We don't stay because of the broken vessels that we all are. We stay because of the treasure. We need a place where we can go set apart from the world, don't we, to receive that treasure so that we will be given the strength to fight off those temptations in life. And the last thing he said, the temptation is that our example has a great influence on those who live and work around us. He said, we doubt that sometimes. We can influence and should influence each other, don't we, my friends? And we forget that we have the power to do that. We forget the power of influence and example. And so this week, my friends, as we begin our journey through Lent, may we realize those three great ways of dealing with temptations in our life: the power of Jesus, the power of the church, and the power of a great example. God bless you.